Not long ago, the Strait of Hormuz was one of the most alive, most active stretches of water on the entire planet. Picture this. Every single day, tankers the size of small towns were moving slowly but steadily through that narrow passage, loaded with crude oil, liquefied natural gas, and refined petroleum products. On average, somewhere between 15 and 17 million barrels of oil pass through that strait every single day. That is roughly 20% of the world's total oil supply, moving through a waterway that at its narrowest point is only about 21 miles wide. 21 miles. That is barely the distance some people drive to work in the morning. And yet, through that impossibly small corridor flowed the economic lifeblood of nations. Ships from all over the world were making their way through those waters around the clock, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Japanese tankers, South Korean carriers, Indian vessels, European freight ships, American supply lines, all of them passing through without much drama. Just the ordinary business of global trade happening quietly on the water. Port workers in the UAE, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia were processing cargo day and night. Businesses were running on schedule. Fuel prices were manageable. The global economy was breathing normally. Now compare that to today. The Strait of Hormuz has become a choke point in the most dangerous and literal sense of that word. Iranian forces have made it increasingly clear that they are willing to use their geographic position, their naval assets, and their missile capabilities to shut down or severely disrupt traffic through those waters. The tankers have slowed. The insurance rates for any vessel attempting to pass through have exploded. Some shipping companies have simply refused to send their ships through altogether, choosing longer, more expensive routes around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and enormous costs to every delivery. The water is still there. The ships are still there. But the confidence that made global trade possible in that region has taken a serious hit. And the question that governments, military strategists, and economists are asking themselves right now is a deeply uncomfortable one. Can Iran actually win this standoff? Because when you sit down and look at the numbers honestly, without the chest beating and the political noise on either side, the answer is complicated in ways that many people are not prepared to hear. Let us start with what Iran actually controls here. The Islamic Republic sits along the entire northern coastline of the Persian Gulf. It has land-based anti-ship missile systems, fast attack boats, submarines, naval mines, and drone capabilities that have been tested and improved for decades with exactly this scenario in mind. Iran does not need to win a conventional naval battle against the United States or its allies. It does not need to sink aircraft carriers or defeat a superior air force. All Iran needs to do is make the strait too risky, too expensive, and too unpredictable for commercial shipping to operate normally. That is a much lower bar. And that is a bar they're very capable of clearing. The Strait of Hormuz is not just important to the region, it is existential to the economic survival of several of America's most critical Middle Eastern allies. Let us talk about them specifically, because this is where the real pressure starts to build. Saudi Arabia is perhaps the most obvious case. The kingdom exports the vast majority of its oil through the Persian Gulf, and while it does have the east-west pipeline that can carry some crude to the Red Sea port of Yanbu, that pipeline has a limited capacity. It cannot come close to replacing the full volume that would normally move through Hormuz. If the strait stays blocked for an extended period, Saudi Arabia's oil revenues, which are the backbone of literally everything the government does, from social spending to military budgets to the Vision 2030 economic transformation program, all of that starts to come under enormous pressure. The Saudis are not exporting from a position of surplus capacity elsewhere. They need that water. The United Arab Emirates faces a similarly uncomfortable reality. Dubai and Abu Dhabi have spent the last 2 decades building themselves into global commercial and financial hubs. That entire model depends on connectivity, on the ability to move goods in and out efficiently. The UAE imports a massive proportion of its food, its consumer goods, its industrial supplies, all of it coming in by sea. If those supply chains get disrupted seriously and for a sustained period, the cost of living in the UAE starts climbing fast. The government can absorb some of that pain in the short term, but the longer it drags on, the more politically and economically destabilizing it becomes. Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar all face versions of the same problem. Qatar, in particular, is critically exposed because it is the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, and a significant portion of those exports move through the Gulf. Europe, Asia, and other buyers around the world depend on Qatari LNG. If Iran can credibly threaten those exports, Qatar loses leverage, loses revenue, and finds itself in a genuinely precarious position despite its enormous sovereign wealth funds. The United States has significant military assets in the region, with bases in Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and elsewhere. Washington has treaty commitments and strategic relationships with all of these countries. But here is the thing that military planners understand, even if politicians are reluctant to say it out loud. Keeping the strait open by force would require a sustained military campaign against Iran, not a surgical strike, not a brief show of force, a campaign. Because Iran has dispersed its capabilities, hardened its infrastructure, and prepared for exactly this kind of confrontation. The cost of a military solution is very high, and the uncertainty about what comes after is even higher. So what happens to America's allies while that campaign is being debated, planned, and potentially executed? They run short. That is what happens. Think about what a prolonged blockade actually means on the ground for countries that depend on those supply lines. It starts with fuel. Even countries that produce oil need refined petroleum products, and those products often move through the same channels. When fuel becomes scarce or expensive, transportation costs spike. When transportation costs spike, the price of everything goes up. Food becomes more expensive, medicine becomes harder to move, industrial production slows because inputs are not arriving on time. The military itself faces logistical strain because modern warfare is extraordinarily fuel and supply intensive. You cannot run a sustained military operation on an empty tank, literally or figuratively. For the civilian populations of Gulf states that import large quantities of food, a prolonged disruption to sea lanes is not an abstract economic problem. It is a practical, day-to-day crisis. Supermarket shelves start looking different. Certain products disappear. Prices become impossible for lower-income workers and migrant labor communities. Social tensions, already simmering in some of these highly stratified societies, start to intensify. Governments that have managed their populations through a combination of wealth distribution and tight control of information find it much harder to maintain that balance when basic goods become scarce. The longer this continues, the more Iran demonstrates something important, which is that a determined regional power with the right geography, the right weapons, and the right patience can impose costs on the entire global economy that are wildly disproportionate to its own economic and military size. Iran's GDP is a fraction of the United States, a fraction of the European Union, a fraction of China. And yet, by controlling this 21-mile bottleneck, it can reach into the economies of every major industrial nation on Earth and make them feel pain. That is not a small thing. That is a form of strategic leverage that most countries in the world simply do not possess. And Iran has been willing to use it in ways that more cautious governments might hesitate to. Every tanker that turns back, every insurance company that adds another surcharge, every oil company that reroutes a shipment, every government that has to explain to its citizens why fuel prices are climbing again, all of that is a data point in Iran's favor at the negotiating table. The world is not running out of options entirely. There are diplomatic tracks still open. There are back-channel conversations still happening. There are economic pressures being applied in multiple directions. But the clock is ticking in a way that favors Iran's basic strategic calculus. The longer the uncertainty persists, the more the global economy adjusts to higher energy prices, the more Iran proves that its leverage is real. The harder it becomes for any outside power to simply will the problem away with a show of military force. The Strait of Hormuz was, not long ago, just a busy waterway that most people never thought about. Today, it is the center of a geopolitical pressure test that will shape the balance of power in the Middle East for years to come. The tankers that used to pass through without incident, the supply chains that ran like clockwork, the fuel prices that held steady, all of that now depends on decisions being made in Tehran, in Washington, in Riyadh, in Beijing, and in dozens of other capitals that are quietly, urgently trying to figure out what comes next. This is a story that is far from over, and the outcome will matter to every single person on this planet who drives a car, heats a home, or buys food that was grown with fertilizer derived from natural gas. Which is to say, it matters to all of us. If you found this video valuable and you want to stay ahead of the stories that are actually shaping the world right now, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.